Hello, thank you for watching my channel today. My name is Sarah and my channel is called Your True Shelf. And today I'm filming a wrap up for all the books that I read in the month of October, of which there were 8. I am drinking a hot chocolate because so it was my birthday at the end of October, and as one of my presents my best friend got me, you know, there's a brand called Vigo, which is like really good vegan chocolate. And they make these things called Vigo melts, which are like these little kind of chocolate discs, and you can use them for making hot chocolate. So I'll insert a little picture of what it looked like. Well, I just made it with like squirty cream and marshmallows, and this is what I have left. It's really yum. So today is Saturday as I'm filming. It's really kind of quite gloomy outside, so I'm facing the window. I've got my less attractive bookcases sitting behind me because this side, oh god, I can never do this. This side is some of my husband's books, which he's probably had for about 50 years and will never read. And then my medical textbooks, and so it's not a very picturesque bookcase, but never mind. This side looks nice, but you can't see it because I've got the chair right in front of it. Anyhow, so yeah, today, so we've done swimming for the kids this morning, and then I've just like done the boring stuff like get the washing on, have a hoover, that kind of stuff. So I'm going to film before the light starts to disappear because it's 2:36 and it will only be about an hour and a bit before the light starts to go, and then I might have a little nap. I'm really tired, we'll see. Let me just have a little bit of my hot chocolate. So the first book that I read was on Audible, and at work we have started a book club. So we had the first month last month and our next one is tomorrow. So the book that we've read for tomorrow is Olive Kittredge by Elizabeth Strout, which I'm not going to talk about today because it will be in the November wrap up, which was a reread for me. But the book that we had last month was Unsettled Ground by Claire Fuller. So I'd heard really good things about this book, and it didn't disappoint. So it is a story about some twins, Juliet and Janie, who are in their 50s. They live in a very rural, isolated community. Well, I don't know if the whole community does. They live in a very isolated part of the community with their mum, who is, I guess, in her 70s or 80s. And they've always all lived together, and they basically live off grid. They make their own food, or they grow their own food. That's really how they make their money. They don't have very much money at all. If they live very hand to mouth, they have a very basic house. And right near the beginning of the book, the mum basically dies, and she leaves the twins, who have really heavily relied on her, to suddenly realise they have to do everything for themselves. And they are very much kind of outcasts in the village, so people don't really understand them. They think they're a bit strange, and it becomes clear as the story goes on that their mum's been keeping stuff from them as well. So we've got some sort of intrigue about what's going on there. They're so poor, I mean, like literally they realise that they're going to have to pay for their mum's funerals. They go to the tin where the money's kept and they find £3 in the tin, and that's all they have. That's their whole worldly whole worldly goods is £3.50 or something. And so it's about their kind of desperate struggle really, and getting to know them. And it was a really good book that we discussed at book club because we talked a lot about sort of families. I guess we come across such a range of families and things as our job at a doctor's surgery, and a doctor's surgery is quite heavily featured in that book as well. And so we could kind of bring to mind families that remind us a bit of this family, and we just talked about how it's just really interesting when you are inside the lives and the mind of that family. You view them very differently to how you'd view them if you were looking at the family from like from a point of view of someone who didn't know them. So yeah, it's a really good book. It's a slow book. It's definitely character driven, not plot driven. You really get to know the characters and what it's like for them to live in such a precarious position. and understand rural poverty. So I really enjoyed that book. That was really good. I gave it, I think, 4.5 stars in the end. The second book that I read was a library book, and I got this one because I'd heard Morgan Long talk about this, and I love Morgan's channel. I'm one of her patrons, and this book, I heard her talk about it and thought that I'd really like it, and they had it at the library. So this is called The Crossroads of Should and Must, Find and Follow Your Passion by Elle. So this book is non-fiction, and it's basically around the concept of there's lots of things all the time that we should be doing. You know, we should be from the small things, like we should be cleaning up, or we should be doing some washing, or we should be going to do the food shopping, or we should be going out with that person, or, you know, all those kind of things, to the things that are must. So the musts are the things which are our kind of our passions, our calling, those things that make us come to life, and how we often just go with the should. We should be doing this, should, and we favour those things, and then we leave out the musts. So this book is about basically honouring your calling, and it's done in a very artistic way. So if I just open up, all the pages are kind of like this. So they've got lots of drawings and things on, so you can read it like really easily, but it's one of those books that you'll probably want to refer back to. So some of it has just got these sort of big quotes on as well. It's very beautifully designed and put together, and it's basically like it talks about at the beginning about the Joseph Campbell quote about following your bliss, and there was a quote that I just read basically saying, like, don't worry, like, thinking about what the world needs, like, think about what makes you come to life, because the world needs more people who have come to life. So it focuses as well on, if you feel like your dream is here and you're all the way over here and you don't know how to close the gap, what you need to be doing is finding those things that are, even if they're really small things, that just bring you a tiny bit closer towards your dream, and honour your calling. And if you don't know what your calling is, it's basically those things that light you up, those things that make you get that joy and that buzzy energy, and the things that make you so, like, really passionate about. Yeah, so it's about that really, and I really enjoyed it. I'm going to get my own copy, and I think it would make a good gift as well, so I really like that one. Okay, so the next one, fantasy book, which I absolutely loved. I saw this first on Christiane Jones' channel. I also saw it on Jane Campbell's channel, and this is Lonely Castle in the Mirror by Mizuki Tsujimura. I'm not sure if this is a YA or an adult book. It doesn't actually say on it at all. I think it could be either, but it's really good. So the premise of this book is that it's set in Japan. It's translated by Philip Gabriel, and it's basically set around 7 teenagers who are all having a really difficult time in their life for various reasons. And our main protagonist is called Kokoro, and she is being bullied at school, and she's basically dropped out of school. She can't face going back to school, and she's struggling with anxiety. Her parents aren't really sure what to do. And one day when she's in her bedroom, her bedroom mirror starts to glow, and she sort of goes to touch it, and her hand goes straight through the mirror, and she can actually go through the mirror, and she ends up in this castle. And there are 6 other teenagers who the same things happen to them as well, and they're all in this castle together, and they figure out between them that they're all kind of school dropouts because of various traumas that they've gone through. And this little girl who has this wolf mask on, who calls herself the Wolf Queen, she basically tells them that they've got, I think it's 10 or 11 months that they can visit the castle every day. They have to leave by 5 p.m, otherwise bad things will happen to them, so they have to go back to their own house by 5. And there's a secret key which is hidden somewhere in the castle, and when they find it, it will unlock the wishing room, and they can have, whoever finds it gets a wish granted, and then once the wish has been granted, the whole castle shuts down, so nobody can go back there again. So that's what they're told at the beginning. So basically this place is kind of like a sanctuary for them now, where they can escape their lives, and they don't know anything about each other. They don't really, like, they're very shy around each other at the beginning, and they learn that the more they share and the more they help each other, the better things will be for them. So this book was absolutely adorable. I really, really loved it. I'd be definitely considering rereading it again. And I think it's the kind of book that if I reread it again, I'd get extra stuff from it now that I know how it ends. But I really loved it. Contender for one of my favourite books of the year. 5 stars, obviously. So the next book that I read was one I read on my Kindle, so I can't hold it up, but I'll insert a picture. This was for Victober, and I did a buddy read with Joe Smith for this, and this was The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. We had a number of contenders, and we picked that one at random from our list of contenders. So I'd read The Importance of Being Earnest a few times by Oscar Wilde, but I hadn't read any other of his works. But I had seen the film many years ago of Dorian Gray, but I couldn't actually remember anything that happened because it was a few years ago. So the idea of this book is that Dorian is a 18-year-old guy. He is extremely attractive, and he his portrait is painted, and then there's another friend of his called Lord Henry who is older and basically saying to him, goodness, you know, you are so attractive and the world could be your oyster. And he hadn't really been aware so much of how attractive he was before this, and so he sort of says, oh, I wish that instead of myself getting older, I wish my I can't remember if he says I wish my picture would age, but he basically says he wishes that he could never age. And Dorian becomes quite corrupted by the people he's hanging around with, and also because he's so attractive, he basically uses people, he ruins people's lives, he becomes more and more unpleasant and hedonistic, and his portrait starts to change. And Dorian himself doesn't change, so even in 20 years time he'll still look the same as he does when he's 18, but his portrait is getting more and more grotesque, and it's kind of like his conscience. So that's sort of the premise of the book. I did enjoy it, but what me and Joe both found was, because Oscar Wilde quotes are so famous, when we came across them in the book, it was kind of like reading meme after meme, because his quotes are so overused, and yeah, that was a little bit strange. But I would say I gave this 3.5 stars because I really liked the writing, but some of the characters kind of grated a little bit. And I also feel like, I think Joe felt as well, because we were kind of both reading other things and we were reading 2 chapters a day. 2 chapters a day. It felt like we were reading it for absolutely ages, because it's only quite a short book, but it felt like it went on for a long time. So it wasn't one of my favourites, but the writing was really good, so I gave it 3.5 stars. The next book I read was one that I really loved. It was Juliet Takes a Breath by Gabi Rivera, and we follow our protagonist, who is Juliet, who is about 20 years old, and she is from her family is Puerto Rican, and she is living in the Bronx, and she is a lesbian, and she has a book that she really loves by this woman called Harlow, who is a white kind of hippie woman who lives in Portland. And Juliet writes a letter to her one day, basically saying how she really loved her book and how much it's influenced her, but there wasn't enough diversity in her book. It was very like white centric. And Harlow basically writes back to Juliet and says, why don't you come and spend the summer with me as an intern, a research assistant, and it will count towards part of your college credits. So Juliet's basically going from the very kind of urban neighborhood to this like completely different community in Portland, over the other side of the country, and she comes out to her family the night before she goes with mixed reviews, and she then goes across the other side of the country, and she feels like she's very open, very curious, she has lots of questions. She's also she's learning a lot as well. So Harlow lives in this community of women. Well, she lives in her own house, but she she has a community of friends of different ethnicities who are all lesbians and all very much feminists, and she learns a lot of stuff about herself, about the world, about other people. She's like I said, she's super curious and open-hearted. She forms friendships. She like falls for different girls. She learns a lot about like race and culture and being queer and just like and female friendship and just so much stuff. And I absolutely loved this book. It was such a breath of fresh air. Like, I think this is an awesome book for YA readers as well as adults. I think it would really help anybody who's like who's just come out or who's thinking about coming out. I think it's just like Juliet has a lot of questions, which I'm sure that a lot of people her age have, and she actually voices the questions and gets some answers as well. So I thought it was just fantastic. The storytelling and the writing was great. The characters were great. The discussions on all of the stuff I just said were really good, and I just really loved that book. Absolutely 5 stars. I'd read more Gabi Rivera. I think this is her first novel, but I would love to read more of her work. So the next one that I read was this one, which is The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman, and I've had this book for probably 10 years. It's a hardback. I got it when it had just come out, and I just haven't read it for some reason. And Christiane Jones loves Neil Gaiman, so I was like, right, this is the time for me to pick this book up, and I did really enjoy it. So this is a kind of a difficult one to describe. Basically, our protagonist is about in his 40s at the start of a book, and he's gone back to where he used to live for a funeral, and then he finds himself going back to the house where he grew up, which isn't there anymore, and remembering like what happened to him as a kid. This is a fantasy book, so he goes back in his head and we follow him from when he's 7 years old, and his parents, he lives with his parents and his little sister, and they have a lodger because they're struggling to make ends meet, and the lodger commits suicide, and this starts off a trail of events. It's hard to describe, but they end up getting this sort of nanny to look after them. He takes over as the new lodger called Ursula, and she's a bad person who is masquerading in as Ursula, but she's not really Ursula. She's this kind of like demon kind of person. And down the road there is a family of a girl and her mum and her grandma who are, they're very old, even though they don't look very old, and they have a pond in their garden which they refer to as the ocean, and they've been there for eons basically, and they have to kind of try and help him reverse like what's happened. So it's really good. I really enjoyed it. I'd probably give this one 4 stars, and I definitely read more Neil Gaiman books. Sorry if that was a really rubbish description of it, but it's really hard to describe. Okay, so 2 more. One of them was a library book, which I've now taken back to the library. It was for the Reading Women's Challenge. So one of the authors to read for the Reading Women's Challenge was Leila Abouleila, and I got one of her books from the library called Elsewhere Home. So this book I didn't actually finish. I read half of it, and it's a book of short stories. I'm not the biggest short story fan. So basically it's set between Sudan and Scotland in all of the stories. So in the ones that I read, there was a person who had left Sudan for whatever reason and was living in Scotland, and they were revisiting their community in Sudan, or they were going back to Sudan. And it was like about how they felt as a displaced person, or how they felt to have like a white Scottish family to be part of, as well as having like Sudanese roots, and how it felt to go home and to leave again and stuff. So I really enjoyed each story, but they were quite similar in what was going on in them. I didn't find them that different, and whilst I was enjoying them when I was reading them, I never really wanted to pick it up again, and I sort of read half the stories and then just thought, kind of done. So I didn't not enjoy them, but I just wasn't rushing to pick them up again. And I think because I was just doing my Marie Kondo Sparking Joy Bix thing, I just thought, well, it's not really sparking joy, so I'm just going to leave it there. So that was that one. I think I can't remember how many stars I gave it. Like I said, don't be put off if you like short stories. It was good writing, good stories, just quite similar for me. So I just sort of kind of tired of them a little bit. And then the last book that I read, I really enjoyed. This was a great book. I was very good, and I bought this book at the end of October, and then I read it. See, it can happen. So this book is called In Black and White by Alexandra Wilson. So I heard about Alexandra Wilson because she is a barrister, and I remember that it was on the news like not that long after George Floyd was murdered. That she was in court, and on one day, a single day, about 4 or 5 times, she was people tried to remove her from court or told her she couldn't be in there because they thought that she was the defendant and not the barrister because she was black. And this was on the news, and I was just like, oh my goodness. And then when I saw that she had this book out, I was like, oh amazing, I definitely want to read this book. And it didn't disappoint. This was a great book. So this is basically Alexandra's journey from when she starts law school, why she starts law school, basically because her cousin was murdered in a knife crime incident, and that made her want to pursue the legal justice route. And she talks about, it's really interesting, I didn't really know anything about law. I didn't really know like how the qualifications work, how you get from a law degree to being a barrister, like what the barrister's training is like. And she talks about all that. It's really, really readable. Like it's kind of similar to if you liked This Is Going to Hurt by Adam Kay, you would like this book, but this hasn't got the same humour in, but it's kind of similar writing style. So it's very readable anyway. And she talks about a lot about like different cases. She talks about common questions that people ask, like how do you live with yourself if you have to represent somebody who is guilty or who's done something really horrific. And she talks about that kind of thing. She talks about what it's like trying to be a women barrister as well. So about how difficult it is for women to have children in that career and still progress their career. And then, of course, she talks about race as well. So there's a whole section on what it's like to be black and be a barrister. But I would say that is definitely a key element to the book, but it's by no means like the whole book doesn't focus on race. But there's definitely like a section. I thought there'd be more about it, to be honest. I was kind of hoping there would be a little bit more about it, but this book didn't disappoint at all. It was really interesting about the profession, about what it's like to be a woman and what it's like to be a black woman, and about how she really does make a great case for why it's so important to have people from different backgrounds in the legal services to decrease prejudice, and also because clients feel much more comfortable if there's people who they perceive to be like themselves. Like, so for instance, if so Alexandra's from Essex and she has an Essex accent, and people just feel more comfortable with her than if she was kind of like had a public school accent. They just find that there's more to relate to. So obviously, like her black clients felt more comfortable with her than if they had like a middle class white man representing them. They felt that they could trust her more. And I think that she just talks about like how important it is to have people from all sort of social backgrounds, different racial backgrounds, different, all walks of life, basically making up part of our court to make it a more fair and representative system. So I really, really liked this book, and I'd highly recommend it. So that's quite a long wrap up, but that is all the books that I read in the month of October. So if you've read any of those, and I'd really love to hear your thoughts, obviously, or if any of them appeal to you. What did you read in October that you found that you really enjoyed? If you watched my last video, it was about choosing what fantasy book I was going to read next, and I did choose The Priory of the Orange Tree. So I'm currently reading this book. I'm only 100 pages in, but I love it so far. It's really good. So I've still got a way to go. I don't know how small November's wrap up is going to be, because this is so big that it might be quite a short wrap up in November. We shall see. But anyway, I hope you're all having a lovely weekend. I hope you go on to have a lovely week, and I'll speak to you all soon. Bye.